Imagine the scene. It's a damp Friday evening, and I'm in Basinghall Street in the middle of the city of London. I'm absolutely exhausted. And I turn to Nick, and I ask him a question. His answer will have profound consequences. It will determine the fate of my company, it will determine the fate of my finances, and quite possibly my marriage too. But before I tell you the answer, we need to go back to the start of the century. Because at the start of the century, I was just quite an ordinary corporate guy, working in a corporate job, climbing the greasy pole, and actually doing quite well. I had a wife, I had 2 daughters, I had kids at school, I had a son, a mortgage, school fees, all the rest of it. I got nagged for not doing enough around the house. And then one day, a new CEO turned up, and my face didn't fit, and I was out. So there I was in my 40s, and then I launched my first business. It was to be a new debit payment system for the UK. You have to give me marks for ambition. I was ambitious, but I was a terrible entrepreneur. The business failed. Undeterred, 2 years later, with angel backing, I got into e-commerce. What could possibly go wrong? As it turned out, quite a lot could go wrong. Customers wanted e-commerce websites for free. The competition was really hard. And then one day, we actually got hacked and payment details were spread all over the internet. We raised further finance to try to keep ourselves going, including, and don't do this at home, folks, don't do this at home, the thing that you were never supposed to do, debt finance with a personal guarantee attached. So in the end, Shop Creator 2 failed. But I managed, somehow, by the skin of my teeth, to minimize my losses and to get out with just losing a 5-figure amount. So it was stressful, this entrepreneurial business. And I guess I handled it mostly through compartmentalization. I didn't really bring my work home. I kept it to myself. My wife knew approximately what was going on, but I'd be lying if I said I'd spelled out all the gory details all the time. So there I was, an aspiring entrepreneur, a 0 from 2 record so far. This was obviously the moment to pack it all in and go and get a proper job and admit that I wasn't cut out for this type of stuff. No. It was time to double down. And having been an advisor, I came in to run a company called Boku. And that's a business that allows people, or at the time, just allowed people to buy things and charge it to their phone bill. And not being a founder, I took on debt of about $800,000 to be able to get myself a proper stake. And frankly, on the surface, when I arrived, everything looked great, because this was a wonderful company with a great idea, with great backing from some of the largest VCs in the world. The Indexes, the Kozler Ventures, the Andreessen Horowitzes, the Benchmarks. We'd raised 70 million of venture capital. Here, at last, was the well-funded company that I could use to continue my entrepreneurial journey. So all fine on the surface. Under the surface, not so good. Revenue was dropping, as the original work had been based around providing payments for things like Farmville on Facebook. I mean, who the heck plays Farmville on Facebook? You understand my problem. And of that 70 million, only 18 million was left. On the day I came into the company, the month I came into the company, $5 million was the cash outflow. 18 million in the bank, $5 million going out in the previous month. Do the maths, it was bleeding. So it was a journey. We had to do quite a few things to stop the bleeding. We collected from our suppliers faster, we paid slower, we borrowed, we made cuts, and we had to re-engineer the way in which we did the business. We re-engineered to be able to be attractive for buying things on mobile devices, managed to sign up companies like Spotify, like Sony, like Microsoft, like Google, and ultimately, perhaps the biggest success for us is when we signed up Apple. So there was light at the end of the tunnel. It felt that we were sort of going to break through. But the problem we had was the prices for those new customers were really low. The value process was going up, but the revenue wasn't really keeping up. We were running up a down escalator, just trying to keep going. And by the time we got to 2016, it was obvious that we weren't going to get to the top. We needed new funding in order to keep going. So we went back to these wonderful VCs who make all those wonderful promises on their websites about how they're there for the founders and back entrepreneurs and all the rest of it. And they gave us a deal that was so good that it would wipe out everybody, including me, for that matter. And so there had to be another way of being able to fund this business. There had to be a better way. And there was. We were able to go back to our angel investors and secured some funds on a convertible note, a loan, if you like. And the terms there were terrible. Basically, the convertible note was for every £1 we borrowed, we had to repay 2 in a year's time plus interest. But it bought us something better. Having raised, I think it was about £16 million then, it bought us the time to be able to improve, to get to the top of that down escalator that was coming towards us. But in that time, we had to go public because there was no way we were going to be able to repay the convertible note in cash. We had to trigger the conversion by going public. So if we didn't go public, then the company was bust, I was bust, and I had some tricky details to explain to my wife about how it wasn't going so perfectly. The IPO process, I have to tell you, was nightmarish. Our CFO left. The replacement CFO left the building with her head in the hands, muttering about how this thing couldn't be saved. A supplier hit us with a claim for over $1 million. Our broker told us we were unfloatable. Come back in 6 months, he said. All the time the clock was ticking, getting closer and closer to that deadline when we had a big bill to pay that we couldn't repay. We had to get hundreds of signatures, produce a prospectus, accounts. I did 100 versions of the presentations, loads of other documents, and eventually we got to the point where we said we were about to be ready. So just as a last dress rehearsal, I presented to the broker's sales team, and they ripped the presentation to shreds. It was a really low moment. I thought, after all this, am I going to fail at the last hurdle? But, tomorrow is another day. I picked myself up and went out into the city. And in those pre-COVID days, the roadshow was literally what we said. You didn't just hop from Zoom to Zoom, you hop from meeting to meeting. And it's completely full on. You start at 8 o'clock in the morning, you end at 7 o'clock at night. There's a meeting every hour, bam, bam, bam. The first week, it's like, on the first day, I didn't have a chance to go for a pee until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a terrible time. So we were trying to raise around 35 million in order to be able to repay that note and to give some funds back for the company. But I told the broker that I didn't want to know how things were going as we went through those 2 weeks. I didn't think it would help. I mean, if we were doing well, then, maybe I'd be complacent. If it went badly, then maybe I'll fluff it again. Better not to know. So all of that brings us to that Friday night. I'm in Basinghall Street, and the question was, Nick, how much? How much is being raised? Remember, we needed 35 million. So Nick drew in breath. He hesitated. He said, I'm not supposed to tell you. I mean, you've got to speak. I said, come on. He said, 70 million is the orders we've got so far. I have to tell you that there was literally no pleasure when I got that 70 million. It was just relief, empty relief. I didn't know what to say. I was so tired, I didn't know what to say. So I went home and I had a drink, which is in fact my first drink I'd had for 6 months. I was on some kind of monastic kick trying to get us through. And the next morning I woke up with a bit of a hangover and to a phone call from the broker, and they said, look, everything's going so incredibly well. What we think we should do is we should just reprice and re-up to be able to make sure we take full advantage of the demand. I said, sure. So the next day, I played around, and then on Monday was when the offer was going to close. It was going to close at 12 o'clock. So around 2 o'clock, I went to the banker's offices to celebrate and to collect the applause, if you will. But something looked a bit off. You look around these city gents, normally sort of ties on, suits and all the rest of it. And the hair was off, the tie was off, the hair was a mess, and they had a worried expression on their face. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? On Friday, I had the money, but then I just said, no, we've got to reprice it. I had it, and then I threw it away. Oh, God, what have I done? So I said, what's up? And Rory, he said, I'm afraid there's a bit of a problem. I don't know how we're going to allocate all the demand, he said. We've had 120 million of orders for your 35. Everyone's going to be disappointed. I said, well, I'm not disappointed. I'm pretty pleased as it happens. So I ran Boku for a further 5 years, and now it's a public company worth about 600 million pounds, and it continues to grow incredibly fast. So when I stepped down as CEO at the end of last year, I reflected somewhat on my journey. And I realized that it was angels who were the heroes in my story. It's hard to be an entrepreneur, and there's many people in this room who I'm sure can tell a version of that story that I've just told. You need resilience, you need luck, but you also need investment, and the best type of investors you can get are angels. So the angels can take big risks and quick decisions. And whilst we were raising that convertible note, there was one incident where I was literally on a London bus, chasing up an investor, saying, hey, Robert, are you in? Can you give me the money? He said, yeah, I'm in for $1 million. I thought, oh, great. He said, and my ex-wife, she's in for $500,000 too. I thought, that's the type of divorce that you want to have. And angels can stand with you in the trenches. They take ordinary shares, unlike VCs, who very often will be taking special privileges or special classes of shares or liquidation preferences and the rest of it. Angels rarely get those type of protections. But do you remember when I was saying with Shop Creator, the business that failed, when I had to take on a personal guarantee? Well, one of my angel investors also stood in the trenches with me to take that personal guarantee. I've never forgotten that. People who are prepared to put their necks on the line and stand in the trenches. So angel investors provide more than mere money. They can provide advice and experience. And so when I had the chance, I wanted to give back, and that's why I have, since stepping down at Boku, become an angel. And I've invested in about 4 startups, and I've tried to provide more than just money, the benefit of my advice if people are interested in it, and it's been very fulfilling. And I do hope that if I'm able to be successful, I will give back just a fraction of the value that I have had from angels over the years. And I do hope that people who are considering angel investment here will also get the chance to help entrepreneurs to grow their businesses. And if you're lucky, you'll make some money too. Thank you very much.